Hi, I'm Tim Conaway, owner of Conaway Golf Academy in Bradenton, Florida, and welcome to a quick 30-minute show on some very specific elements I feel are important in our setup and building the proper backswing. About 75% of my lessons involve these subject matters, and that's why I want to dedicate the next half hour to focusing on some three or four components that are very specific and very important to get you to be in the proper position at the top of the backswing so we can deliver the club into the golf ball more naturally, without a lot of force, without a lot of effort, and definitely without using our hands to guide the club into impact. We're going to focus primarily on these three areas. We're going to focus on our setup. We're going to take a deep dive into our posture and our stance. We're also going to talk about the arm function in the backswing. The arm structure is a better way to describe it. What we need to be paying attention to with both arms, how we can develop them, and then we're also going to talk about what are some key components to building the proper pivot. Finally, we're also going to talk a little bit about some club dynamics, understanding the tool that we use a little more in depth so we can use it to our advantage, and then we're going to talk about how we can also do some practice drills to develop all the skills that we're going to present. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about how we set up to the golf ball. This is really a significant portion in our path to a better backswing, because how we set up is going to influence significantly how we're able to move our body correctly. I deal with a lot of clients that come to me and they say, hey, I've been told I want to be in an natural athletic posture. And while that's great advice, it's not conducive to swinging a golf club correctly. When we get into that natural athletic state that we've all been taught, we're thinking about, how a shortstop stands in the infield, or we're talking about how a cornerback in the football field stands. They get very low, they get their weight on their toes, so they can spring in a lateral fashion vertically or in front of them, behind them, and laterally at any moment's notice with a lot of speed. That is what a natural athletic posture will do for us. However, in golf, we don't want to have any of those movements. We want to be stable and create rotation with our body. So we need to understand the differences in our setup so we can achieve this movement without as much effort. A lot of issues I see with poor posture stem from trying to be naturally in this athletic position. A lot of players will drop their chest to the ground. They will bend their knees towards their toes, and then they're going to have really short arms in their golf swing. When they have the short arms, now the arms are going to be doing a lot of work in moving the club back and through the golf ball, which in swinging the golf club, we don't want to happen. So when we talk about posture, I want people to stand taller at address, okay? I know this is counterintuitive because we're all saying keep our head down so we can hit the golf ball. But by standing taller in our posture, we're going to be able to have more functional mobility to create this rotation. A key component in our posture is our ability to maintain balance and stability. And those two are not the same, and let me demonstrate. As I'm standing here talking to you, I'm able to be balanced and stable because my body is stacked on top of itself. I don't have my head leaning forward, my hips going backwards. Everything is neutral, and with that neutrality in my setup, I can have stability at my feet. Now, if I were to just drop my head, bring my head forward off of my chest, my weight is going to go towards my toes, and now I'm no longer as stable. And so that's the reason why, is because I've had one element of my body move towards my feet while no other element has counterbalanced that weight going backwards. And so I lose my stability. So when we establish our posture, we want to make sure we achieve that neutrality in our positioning, so whatever element of our body goes forward, we have one element of our body going backwards. And this is going to keep us stable and balanced so we can create this proper rotation. So what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you drive your hips, keeping your head up, and I like to call it a nice long neck. I don't want the chin going down into the chest, shortening the neck. Keeping a nice long neck, drive your hips backwards. Okay? This is going to naturally bring your shoulders forwards towards the ball, and because I haven't dropped my head at all, I'm still in this neutral position. Okay, and I then to establish a little bit of soft knees, I just feel like I lower my butt just a little bit. A couple key lines that I want you to pay attention to when we set up this way are two things. Number one, as you can see, my knee is staying over my ankle. That's very important. If I were to bend my knees and pitch them towards my toes, now I've lost my stability and I'm not gonna be able to turn my body correctly. Also, when I set up, I drive my hip so it goes outside, my hip bone goes outside my heel. That's also very important. When I have my grip, I'm also going to have the inside edge of my trail arm is going to be in line with my kneecap, okay? That's a very critical line that I want to look at. Also, my shoulders are going to be in line with my toes, and my hands are going to be right underneath my chin. When I establish those 4 lines in my setup, I know I have this stability that we need to turn the body correctly, okay? So that's what's really critical in how we set up with our body. The one element I want to introduce with our arms is we want to make sure our arms are nice and long and we bring them on top of the chest like so. I don't want them to the side of the body. That's going to create a little bend in my arm, in my elbow joint, and that brings my hands too close to the body, and now I'm just going to have to flip my hands to get the club around. I want nice long arms so when I set up to the golf ball, I stay nice and tall and I'm in great stability so that I can then begin to create my rotation with my body and stay in balance. Okay, so we've established our new posture, and just to review, the key components of proper posture is having balance and stability. We want to feel like we're standing nice and tall to the golf ball with a very long neck, and our arms are on top of our body and extended, so they're very long as well. All of those elements in a nutshell are going to help us enable us to have functional mobility so we can turn properly in the backswing. We're going to dive into the pivot in a little bit, but first I want to talk about the arm structure in the backswing, because this is really critical. It's going to influence and shape the club's plane and path through impact, and a lot of it is misunderstood and definitely misapplied. Typically, a lot of amateur players, when they get to the top of the backswing, they get the trail elbow up high. As you can see here, the lead elbow is underneath the trail elbow, and what that does is that kicks the club across the line and opens up the club face. From this position, you're going to come across the golf ball through impact. There is no other way to get the club back to the ball, because you're not going to be able to go from here back underneath unless you're falling away from the target through impact, which is something we don't want to do. That's not a functional pattern of delivery. So from this upper body position, the only way to get the club back to the ball is to come around and down, and that club face is going to be pointing off to the right of the target, and then you're going to hit that big hole cut. So this could be the source for your slice. So this is very critical for you. If you see the ball go to the right in your ball flight, I want you to pay attention to what we're going to talk about in the next 5 minutes. When it comes to arm structure, I want to isolate both arms from each other so we can learn the correct pattern, because they do things independently yet cohesively together. They work in a synergistic relationship, but they're doing opposite things simultaneously, okay? And so we need to, if you have this over the top pattern, this high right elbow at the top of the swing, we need to train them individually first and then apply them collectively later down the road. So I like to talk about the trail arm first, because that's really the guiding force in what the lead arm does. Typically, for a right-handed player, the right hand is the dominant hand on the body, and so if we pay attention to the movement of what the right hand and the right arm do, we can control that first, and then apply the left hand to the grip and learn how to use the left hand on the club as well. When it comes to the trail arm function, I focus on the trail shoulder joint, okay? It's very important to understand some general movements within that shoulder joint. So we're gonna go through them real quick. I often refer to internal and external rotation of the shoulder joint. And this changes during the golf swing, which we'll explain. But first you need to understand what it feels like to have an internally rotated shoulder or an externally rotated shoulder. So if you think about throwing a football or throwing a baseball, if you work out in a gym, and I use this reference primarily with my students, I try to put you in your mind about doing a butterfly press. Okay, so butterfly press is you start this way with some weights on with the Nautilus machine on your elbows, and you pull your elbows into your body like so. Okay, so When you're in this position, your shoulders are externally rotated, okay? As you bring your elbows in, they become inwardly rotated or internally rotated, okay? So if we understand what those terms mean, we're gonna be able to apply the trail arm function with our right arm correctly. When we set up to the golf ball, again, nice long arms, we're going to set up with our trail shoulder internally rotated, okay? This is critical. As we build our backswing, we want to maintain internal rotation in the takeaway initially, okay? If I get into external rotation too early, you can see how that gets the club head getting stuck behind me and it opens up the club face. This is a really bad position from here because I'm going to be compensating and not be able to deliver the club the way I want to. So in the takeaway, I want to be able to make sure that I stay an internally rotated trail shoulder so the club head stays on the outside of my hands. And we achieve this position of internal rotation until the shaft is parallel to the ground like so, okay? This is critical because we're going to create a lot more width in our backswing versus getting the internal too early. You can see I have a very narrow arc at that point. And so that width is also going to introduce pelvic rotation as well, which is critical. Now, this is the tricky part. From this position, we're going to get into external rotation of the trail shoulder by relaxing the trail elbow and letting it drop. Okay, so you can see my trail elbow is now underneath my wrist instead of being high like in this position. When I get that trail elbow to drop, that trail shoulder is going to externally rotate, and as you can see, the shaft of the club is well behind my hands instead of across the line at the top of the backswing, which we want to avoid. This is the proper position with the shaft that way we want. You can also see my club face is square. This is an open club face position, which we want to avoid. So, internal to external and stop. All right? And what we want to do is we want to take practice swings, no golf ball, just feeling how from here we can then turn and swing through nice and soft and easy. This is how we retrain the trail arm. Internal, external, pivot through. Okay? We do this several times. And we want to feel that right elbow drop at the top of the backswing. Okay? So now, let's move on and focus on how the left arm or the lead arm complements the trail arm. Okay? Understanding that the lead arm isn't doing the majority of the work in the backswing, but we do need to have functional movement that complements what the trail arm does. So when I grip with the lead arm, and the lead arm only, and I do one arm swings a lot to train these individual components. The first mistake I see is that players have been told, I got to keep my arm on my body, arm on my chest. So if I keep, if that's what we do, and I keep this left arm pinned to my chest, the club is going to get stuck behind me, and I'm going to get too vertical, and I can't extend very well, and my right arm gets bottled up. And you can see, I don't want my right arm really low at this point. I definitely want it higher, but I can't do so if I keep my left arm pinned to my body. So as I'm building this club, or getting this club to go into parallel while I was maintaining my internal rotation with the trail shoulder, the lead arm comes off the chest. So we're going to extend here, and there's going to be some separation between my chest and my upper arm. This is critical because as I get this right shoulder to drop, or the right elbow to drop, the left arm has to internally rotate, which gets that lead elbow higher. Okay? So remember we talked about at the beginning of the session, a lot of players end up here, and we got to flip it and end up here. So the left arm is higher than the right. So with a lead arm only swing, lead arm comes off the chest, and then you internally rotate that lead arm so you get to this position with the left elbow getting a little higher, and there's your right hand on the club the way it should be, and your arm structure is completely different than where it was to begin with, okay? So, again, one arm swings to develop this practice and develop the feel and the pattern, and you can segment them if you would like. Pivot, internally rotate, swing through, okay? Pivot, internally rotate, swing through, all right? Now, let's put both hands on the golf club and just focus on feeling this new pattern of movement collectively. okay? I want you to pause at the top of the backswing. You need to feel the difference between the right elbow high, the left elbow low versus the opposite, okay? So this arm structure that we've talked about is going to help you naturally pivot through the golf ball to deliver better contact. We're going to work on our pivot coming up, but focus on this arm structure and these drills to give you better position at the top of the backswing. So we've talked about proper posture, we've talked about arm structure in the backswing, and just a quick recap so we can keep moving forward, because all of these elements are intertwined, and it's really critical that you don't view what we're discussing today as individual components, but look at it as a more cohesive, holistic approach to swinging the golf club. The posture, we want to focus on having stability and balance in our setup, standing nice and tall, arms nice and long, neutral balance, head up, nice long neck, okay? Our arm structure, a lot of players feel that right arm dominates the backswing, the right elbow gets higher in the backswing than the left at the top, and that causes a lot of problems. So we need to change and flip that structure so that the right elbow is underneath the handle and the left elbow is a little higher. We talked about how we can do that, focusing on some external rotation with our trail shoulder, and that really is the key critical element to applying that arm structure in the backswing. Now I want to address how we can focus on, or what we need to do to focus on the proper pivot sequence to complement that arm structure, okay? This is where I would say in my coaching experience, 90% of the issues occur in the golf swing, is an improper pivot. A misunderstanding of the golf swing tends to lead towards that. Misapplication of just where the force in the golf swing is also causes this to happen. I see a lot of players when they get up to the golf ball, even when they have the proper posture, they're going to make a pivot where their shoulders are flat to the ground, okay, and they move their center of gravity way over to their right. This is part and parcel to trying to feel effort in the golf swing and feel force in your movement, in your applied motion, because we all feel the need to swing hard. We all want to make that ball go as far as possible, whether you're hitting your 7-iron or your driver. It manifests itself even more so with the longer clubs. And so we really need to pay attention to how we can create energy within our golf swing efficiently. So we're not swinging hard, we're not losing our balance, and we're able to apply speed in the proper way and in the proper sequence through impact, so we can generate as much velocity with the golf ball as possible. One of the keys to a proper pivot is that our center of gravity doesn't move laterally during the golf swing, okay? Now this is achieved, this is imperative, because if my center of gravity moves laterally, then I have to compensate for it coming through in the forward swing, and therefore I'm expending energy without applying speed through impact. So what I want to focus on is, as we set up to the golf ball, we stand up nice and tall to begin with, and then as we build our backswing, we're going to create this tilted shoulder plane with our shoulders, and that's going to make us feel actually taller at the top of the swing than we were at address, okay? So we're going to set up nice and tall and get even taller in the backswing with this nice tilted shoulder plane. When we have this nice tilted shoulder plane, we're going to be able to stay right on top of the golf ball and then turn through impact naturally to deliver the speed through impact. Now, in order for us to achieve that tilted axis with our shoulder plane, we have to pay attention to our spine angle. That's the secret sauce and the secret ingredient that allows us to turn with this tilted plane. To understand what the spine does and the spine angle and how it changes, we need to have some terminology understanding. So I want to explain to you what I mean as far as flexion and extension with the spine, because those are two key elements that, if we understand what they are and can apply them, this tilted axis turn that we have with our shoulders is going to be a lot easier to achieve. So when we set up to the golf ball, we tilt forward by driving our hips back, our shoulders come forward over our toes. In this position, our spine is what we call in a flexed position, or spinal flexion, okay? If we were to stand straight up, we have a neutral spine angle, but if we were to arch our back backwards, that's called spinal extension. Okay, so spinal flexion is here, spinal extension is back here, okay? Just so we understand that terminology first, then we can dive into how this applies to our pivot in the backswing. So as I said, when I set up to the golf ball, I want to make sure that I'm in spinal flexion, okay? And again, nice and tall, neutral stability, all the things we've already talked about. As I build my pivot, I need to get my pelvis working as well as my upper body simultaneously. If I don't, and I freeze my pelvis and it doesn't rotate with my upper body, I'm going to stay in spinal flexion, okay? And from here, all my weight is now on the outside of my right foot. You can see my right foot's beginning to curl to the outside. And I do that at velocity, I'm going to lose all of my balance because my pelvis wasn't rotating with my upper body simultaneously. However, if I get my pelvis involved in my rotation, then this shoulder, the trail shoulder, is going to work up instead of backwards, and that is going to allow me to get into this spinal flexion, or excuse me, spinal extension at the top of the backswing. This is going to create the proper pivot so my center of gravity hasn't moved off of the golf ball. It hasn't shifted to the right at all. As you can see, my center of gravity and my body mass is right on top of the ball. This is because I've created spinal extension in my backswing, which is really critical. That component there is going to allow my shoulders to turn on this tilted axis, okay? So we want to understand what spinal flexion is, and we want to be able to make sure that in order for it to occur in the backswing, the pelvis has to pivot with the upper body as we move the club off the golf ball. So we do have a couple drills, a couple feels that help us do this, okay? The first one is what I like to call the flamingo drill. This is going to be where we set up, and we pull the right foot off of the golf ball, and we're just going to make nice smooth swings. And you can see, because I don't have my right foot positioned where it normally is, I can't slide to the right and stay in flexion, or I'm going to fall over. In order for me to make my golf swing, I have to get into an extended spine angle, okay? That's trail leg off of the golf ball forces me to do that, okay? Then I just want you to make nice, smooth practice swings, okay? Try to maintain your balance, focus on a nice, smooth rhythm, get the club to brush the grass nicely through impact. And you're going to find that that building of the height is going to create that spinal extension. Another great drill that you can do without a golf club in the comfort of your home, stretching your body out every once in a while, I call it a tilted thoracic stretch, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to stand up in our golf posture. We're going to let our arms hang underneath us. We're going to pivot the body so that my right arm is going to end up pointing to the sky right above my head, okay? And I'm going to go and hold that position, okay? As you can see, in order for me to do that, I have to get my pelvis rotated, and I create this shoulder tilt with the tilted axis with my shoulders. So I'm going to go and hold and feel what it's like to stay there, okay? Hold it, go and hold for about 3 or 4 count, and come back and relax, okay? Then, if you do that on a regular basis, before you warm up on the round of golf, before you warm up on the driving range, then you take your golf club, and at about 50% speed, we're not swinging fast, we're not swinging hard, we want to replicate what you just felt with that stretch. Building this nice tilted thoracic extension, top of the backswing. And then you can swing nice and through, okay? So if you focus on those 2 drills and get your pelvis involved in the rotation right away, you're going to create this spinal extension in the backswing, which will help you create this tilted shoulder axis, which is going to keep you centered on top of the golf ball and make better contact because of that. We've talked about how we set up to the golf ball. We've talked about our arm structure. We've focused on how to build the proper pivot. And again, as I said at the beginning of the class, these are the key, this takes up the majority of my lessons when I teach on the lesson tee. The majority of issues that occur in a player's swing occur in setup and or in the backswing. How they deliver the club into the golf ball is a result of where they've gotten in the backswing. So we spend a lot of time developing an understanding, a working knowledge of the golf swing and how we want to apply it with our body and the golf club and deliver the changes in the backswing so the forward swing is going to be different. Now, to have that real mastery level of knowledge about how you move, how the golf club moves in the golf swing, you have to understand the golf club and the tool that we use to swing the golf club. And there are a couple things I want to point out specifically. Number one, if you just look at the tool that we have in our hands, okay, it's a stick in its simplistic form. It's a stick with weight at the end of it. And on the other end of it is where we hold on to, okay? So, first things first, let's talk about the movement of the hands and the handle of the club and the relationship to the club head's movements, okay? As I stand here holding the club parallel to the ground, we obviously have the club head and the handle of the club in line with each other. If I want to get the club head lower to the ground, and I ask this question all the time to my students, what does the handle of the club have to do? And they look at me like I got a couple heads, and they're like, well, it's got to go down. And I'm like, okay. They both went down, okay? But that's not what we do in the golf swing. We want to get that club head to work down and away from the body in the forward swing. And in order for that to happen, watch what this handle has to do. It has to work up and into the body. Okay, so you see that again, down and away, works the handle up and in. And so I often talk about the hand path coming through impact is we want to work the handle upwards through the golf ball, not down and away. And this action that I see quite often on the lesson tee is driven by the fact they've been told they have to hit down on the golf ball. Okay, somewhere along the line, whether it was a friend of theirs or a coach, somewhere along the lines years ago, they were told to hit down. So they instinctively will drive the handle down towards the ball. Now, watch what happens when I drive my hands down to the ground. You can see that that club head is getting on the outside of the golf ball, and it's going to cut across the golf ball. My club face is also right of where the path is going, and that's going to produce our curve to the right, which we want to avoid. So just by understanding through impact, we've got to get the hands to work up. As you can see, if I do that, my path is more to the right through impact with my face square, and that's the pattern we want to produce through impact to get more solid striking. So that's club dynamics. Let's talk about balance and weight of the golf club as well, because it has a massive influence on our ability to create the backswing pivot that we've already, or backswing execution that we've talked about during this class. We need to be able to manage the weight of the club so it's in balance with itself. And what I mean by that is, first of all, in order for us to do that, I should say, first of all, we have to identify where on the club the center of mass is located. Okay, now it's going to be a little bit different with each club because each club is a different length, quarter inch, half inch here. So it's never going to be in a universal location. But generally speaking, the center of mass of the club is removed off of the club head a little bit, and it's also removed off of the shaft slightly. Because again, there's a lot of weight here in the club head that's bringing weight off of the shaft. So the center of mass is positioned right about here in line with the club. And notice that I'm doing so in this position, okay? So we're going to talk about how this club face and its angle through the swing affects that position of the center of mass. So next time you're at the driving range, if you're not in a place where you can do so as you're watching this video, I want you to take your golf club, I want you to put your left hand on the club like so, and I want you to extend your club out like straight away from the body. I want you to reference how the club feels in your hand when you're in this position. You know, how heavy it is, where the weight of the club feels in your hand, and just take note of that. Now, once you've taken note of that, I want you to take the golf club and spin it in your hand so the club face points to the sky. And then I want you to re-grip. And watch what happens when I re-grip the golf club. You see how low it got? That's because the center of mass has shifted in the weight of the club, and it's gotten further off of the shaft, and it's not in line with my hands anymore. Okay, so the center of mass, remember, is in this spot right about here. It's no longer in line with my hands, and that's why I feel more weight. When I have it in this position, the center of mass is in line with my hands. I don't feel as much weight. Okay, this is critical because in the act of making the backswing, if I open the club face up, Now I'm going to feel more weight in my hands because the center of mass is out of position. When I feel more weight in my hands in the golf swing, guess what I'm going to do? On a subconscious level that I can't control, my hands are going to take over the golf swing. When there's weight involved, the hands respond, not the body, okay? So when I get the weight, when I feel weight in my hands, I'm going to lift. And look what happens to my right elbow. It's now above my left elbow, which we talked about in the second segment of this class, we want to avoid, okay? So we want to make sure that we maintain control of the center of mass of the club in the backswing by taking the club out wide. And you can see that center of mass is in line with my hands still. And then from there, because the club is nice and light, I can pitch it back behind me. And now the center of mass is still behind my hands. It's not way out in front. When I'm over here, you can see how that club drops to the ground because all the weight of the club is pulling me there. But from here, I can keep that club up nice and high, and now I can deliver impact with my body instead of pulling the handle downwards, okay? When I'm in this orientation up here, the center of mass is pulling on my hands. Instinctively, I'm going to go to where I feel the least amount of weight in my hands, which is shaft vertical. And shaft vertical means an open club face. And I can't control it at that point. I've lost the shot. It's going to go to the right unless I do some sort of compensation move coming back through impact. So we understand where the center of mass of the golf club is and how we can manage it, and specifically manage the club face as well. That's going to keep that club nice and light in my hands, and so I'm not going to use them intuitively to swing the club through impact. I'm going to pivot with my body through impact, deliver quality strikes with a square path, square face, and hit my target more often. All right, so we've gone over all this information and you're like, okay, that's great, Tim. I really like what you talked about, but how can I apply it in my practice so I can develop it and get better? Well, here's what we need to do. When we're practicing, real quick, we need to go to the driving range with a plan in place. Okay, the plan needs to be twofold. Number one, we want to focus on one element of the swing that we want to develop. This is called golf swing practice, okay? Golf swing practice is identifying, isolating, and developing. So an example of that is, let's just say you feel your right arm getting a little loose at the top of the swing. So guess what? We're going to take one arm golf swings, okay? Without the golf ball, and you know what? Without caring where the golf ball goes, you're going to make a one-arm golf swing with the golf ball as well. We need to have contact and some feedback. Okay? We're not going to care about that result whatsoever. We need to detach ourselves away from the result. We do that several times just to feel the proper pattern, the proper positioning at the top of the backswing, so we can deliver nice quality contact. Now, after doing that 10 times, okay, I want you to swing with two hands 50% speed. We don't go full speed right away because when we go full speed, we tend to lose track of our technique that we're trying to develop. So we want to swing at 50% speed. Okay? Not too hard. Again, just reinforcing what we're trying to feel with the pattern. And again, not caring what these results are. That's the most important element in practice when you're focusing on your swing, is to not care about that result, okay? There's going to be a time, and we'll get there in a minute. But for now, 2 or 3 50% speed swings, not trying to care about where the golf ball goes, just reinforcing the pattern. Once you've done that 2 or 3 times, we've gone through some one-arm swings, 2-arm swings at slow speed. Now we're going to go live. And these live shots, I'm going to give you 4. Okay? Of the 4, we count how many we hit well. These need to be towards a target, and these need to be dedicated and deliberate. Okay? So we're going to hit 4 shots. Live, full speed. Okay? Okay? You do that 4 live shots. You track how well you do out of 4, okay? We're starting low with that number. Once you've done 4 shots, guess what? Start over again. One-arm swings. Several. And then 50, then repeat the process. As you get better, raise the number of live shots. We need to measure our results during our practice so we can gauge how we're doing. Okay, if we're not doing that, we're not going to get better. So the key to proper practice: identify, isolate, and develop, and then have measurable results at the end so you can track how well you do.